Today I'm talking to Matthew Young, who is a longtime friend of mine who has reconnected with me since moving to Dubai. And Matthew, you are from the UK, as I am, and you have been living, I understand, in Dubai about 5 or 6 years?
6 years.
6 years. And I want to talk to you today about Dubai and your experience in your time in Dubai. And I wanted to start by saying that to me, Dubai is a bit like Marmite. You know, people who've either been to Dubai love it or hate it. People who
That's it.
talk about Dubai and have never been to Dubai seem to have an opinion and want to go or definitely don't want to go.
hmm
So I just wonder where you fit in relation to Dubai and what drew you to Dubai.
Oh, wow, lots of questions in one question. Um, so before I decided to come and live here, I came with my ex-wife on holiday in 2013, and it was all right. Like as a holiday destination, it was all right. And we came for 4 days, a long weekend, and it was very in June. It was very hot, and and nobody can prepare you for that kind of heat if you're not used to it. But then I came to visit my brother in September 2018, and he had moved here in 2009, and he'd been here ever since, and he's still here. And by then, my circumstances in life had changed considerably, and she wasn't yet my ex-wife, but she was. We were on our way to being divorced, and we'd separated earlier in 2018. So when I came here, then I saw it in different through different eyes, and I saw it as the land of opportunity or a land of opportunity rather than not a great holiday destination. So I guess the context was different as to what I was looking at it through. And it's just seemed like a no-brainer actually
Mm.
for all sorts of reasons. For
And
all sorts of reasons.
and so when you went to see your brother, do you think you were already questioning and asking yourself, could you live there, or were you literally just going into Dubai thinking it was another holiday?
Um, so it it wasn't a holiday, he says, making quotation marks with his fingers. um, because so I remember it was my brother's 40th birthday. Uh, my former sister-in-law had invited me because she was throwing him a party. I had little better to do, so I did it. And I didn't really come here with any expectations of or ideas. I guess I was thinking about, well, what do I do? I mean, my everything in my life had been pared right back almost to nothing, and so I wasn't actively questioning, shall I move country? But I came here. I got inspired by something actually. I really got inspired by something. So uh, we went shopping to the local Carrefour. So Carrefour is predominant here. It's one of the biggest supermarket chains, and we were standing in Carrefour by the spices section. They have the most amazing spices section. They sell as well as spices, olives and nuts and all that kind of thing. And at the time, I was in a relationship with a lady from Turkey, and I stood in this Carrefour, and I suddenly got this. I don't know if I closed my eyes, but it was very evocative of places in Istanbul, the smells, the sounds, even the sights. And I just suddenly had this idea, actually, if we're going to be together, we could have a life here. And it started from that. So you could say I came here for love, but I didn't know that's why I came here. And the ironic thing is, unfortunately, it didn't work out with her and I. And although we were in a long-term relationship, she never came to live with me, and we never set up a home together and all of that. But that's where I first had the idea. Because also this
Mm.
is a Muslim country, Turkey is a Muslim country, and I just thought this is the perfect place like it's neutral ground for two people from different countries, different backgrounds, different religions to start a life together.
Mm,
And so that's where the idea came from. And then I looked around and I saw lots of tall tower blocks, and I'm a property manager by profession. And I thought I must be able to get a job as a property manager. And so far I haven't, but that's not the point. So something changed while I was standing in Carrefour,
mm,
and I think that was the pinpoint moment. And of course, when I started looking at it as somewhere to live rather than somewhere to come on holiday, it changed. And
yeah.
then I started looking at it like that. And actually, after I came here, I went back to the UK. So I was only here for 4 days, and then I did a tour of Southeast Asia for 3 and a bit months. And while I was away in Asia, that's when I solidified for myself. Actually, when I get back, I'm going to move to Dubai.
Wow. And
Yeah.
and how has your relationship with Dubai evolved over time?
Um, it's home. It's now home. It wasn't home when I got here. So I might say, if I'm talking to somebody, I'm going home tomorrow if I'm flying to the UK. But when I'm in the UK, I look forward to coming back here because
Mm,
this is where my home is. This is where life is. Despite its ups and downs and the things that are challenges and the things that are difficult and the things that are easy, this is home. And it wasn't home straight away, but it gets that way. So that's how your relationship changes.
mm,
I think that's probably true for anybody that moves to a foreign country.
yeah,
I think for the first year that it was a lot of novelty value,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's worn off as well.
Yes, yeah. And what are some of the things that you think? I always think when you go into a country, you have completely new eyes and you see things that you won't see in the same way once you've been there a handful of
Mm,
months or longer because
mm.
you've kind of woven your way into the fabric. What struck you when you were first there? Do you recall?
Um, well, I'm now in my mid 50s. My memory is not what it used to be, and I think I've forgotten more than I remember. I'm just looking back in my mind's eye. It was quite wondrous when I first got here. I mean, you come to this city, and first of all, you have to appreciate Dubai's role as part of the United Arab Emirates. You know, people think of Dubai as a place, and it's a city. It's an emirate, but it's one of the seven emirates that makes up the United Arab Emirates. And people forget that. You know, for example, down the road is Abu Dhabi, um, and then there's Ajman and Sharjah, and that's all part of it as well. They're inextricably linked. But when you live abroad, you kind of think of them. You think of Dubai as just on its own. So I didn't have an understanding or an appreciation of that. But the whole place was just completely wondrous. It wasn't here 30 years ago. I mean, they've literally built it from scratch. I think of it as a model village. It's like it's got a fantastic transport system with a tram system and a metro that they keep expanding, and everything's new. Even now, it's still new. Even the stuff that's old is new because there's nothing older than 30, maybe 35 years.
Mm,
Um, and it's developing all the time and changing all the time. And there are people like my brother who've been here 15 years, and the way things have changed in that time is even bigger than the way they've changed since I got here.
yeah.
So to answer the actual question, I think um, it's my understanding of Dubai's place in the UAE is
Mm,
is the biggest thing. It's not just this microcosm.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking about you just saying that Dubai is a Muslim country, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also a country that welcomes in people from just about everywhere. And as a
Everywhere.
result,
Yes.
it's got literally hundreds of nationalities
Yes. Well,
coexisting. And yeah,
yes. I think that's one of its strengths, but objectively, I think it's one of its weaknesses as well. So it is great that there are so many different nationalities here and different religions as well, um, just coexisting side by side. And the UAE did something historic in 2021. I can't remember when it was actually, but there's a thing called the Abraham Accords where the UAE started diplomatic relations with Israel. So whereas previously you couldn't fly directly to Israel from Abu Dhabi or Dubai or anywhere, now there are direct flights. So actually we now see people from Israel here as well. And they're obviously from Israel, just because you know what certain people from Israel look like. Anyway, so it is one of its strengths that everybody is welcome, and there's no because of the way society is set up, there are no protests. So people can't protest about certain people coming here that they don't want here because actually we're all guests in somebody else's country, right? However long we're here for, we're all guests. And I imagine you feel the same about the US.
Yes, totally.
You know, and what do you do when you're in a guest home? Well, you behave yourself and you're very polite and you do what you think is expected of you, not to upset your host. It's kind of the same when you move to a foreign country, and I think everybody has that attitude to an extent. And it's great that there are so many different cultures. There's different foods, different traditions. People look different, vibrant clothes, not vibrant clothes. You know, all the whole range. But then on the negative side, we all bring with us our way of doing things, right? So I bring with me the way things are in the UK, right? And that doesn't necessarily work here because the way things work here is the way things work here, not the way the things work in the UK. It doesn't make them wrong, but different business practices, like if you've got colleagues. So I worked for a real estate brokerage. I think we had 41 different nationalities working there.
Wow.
Yeah, that's 41 different cultures, 41 different sets of business practices. Which one of them is correct? Which one of them is right? And it's not about right or wrong, but it causes conflict, whether that conflict comes up. And it doesn't have to come up in a physical sense or we're going to protest about this sense. But wherever there's conflict, it causes difficulty. And I experience that a lot. Now that could be me. I'm very well aware that could be me, and only me. But that, you know, there's its strength and its weakness all in one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure many people experience that conflict. And how does it get resolved because it's all under the umbrella system of the system, you know, of the way it works in Dubai, or
It's worse
more
than
complex
that.
than that? Yeah.
No, it just gets stuffed down. People forget. You basically have to deal with yourself and get over it. It's how can I put it? Yeah, it's just you have to get over yourself. You just have to be responsible and it is what it is, and then get on with life. Because if you complain, people aren't interested because around the corner there's just another complaint, and it's not that kind of society.
Yeah.
They're creating something different.
Yeah.
So complaining doesn't help
forward anything. No.
No.
Well, it rarely does anywhere. So, but clearly,
yes, quite.
But it's magnified there as a, you know, as it's interesting that that I think it's an interesting perspective that you need to address yourself rather than put the fault somewhere else. You know, if you're going to be there, you work out how to be there and work with how it works rather than try and change the wheel type of thing.
Yeah, but let me try and clarify. So I don't know. Let's say I go into a restaurant and I get bad service.
Yeah,
I might be unhappy about it. I have to deal with my own unhappiness. Complaining to the restaurant manager makes little or no difference.
okay.
That's what I mean. It's not.
Yes.
I get where you were coming from, and actually sometimes I do that as well. but I just have to deal with my own upsets.
Mm,
But that's what everybody seems to do, and it just kind of gets suppressed
right. And
because nobody likes conflict.
right. Yes.
It's about avoiding the conflict.
Interesting. Hmm.
Mm.
And so what would you say are the things that you really like about Dubai? What are the things that, you find that are really workable and things that, sometimes you would wish maybe if you lived somewhere else existed somewhere else?
Um, uh, so the thing I really love more than anything is the weather. So given my comment earlier about 50 degrees in June, I've acclimatized to it, and it doesn't bother me. So everywhere's air conditioned. Okay, so you go from your air conditioned home, you get in your air conditioned car, or the air conditioned bus, or metro, or air conditioned bus shelter, or air conditioned bus, and you walk into an air conditioned office or office building or an air conditioned mall. So the heat actually is less of a problem than I kind of made out when we first started. And I just love the fact that I open my curtains in the morning and the sun's shining. Mostly.
Mm, mm,
I mean, we do get fog sometimes, and it gets very cold in the desert, apparently. But I've never been in the desert to see it get very cold. And the other night I was driving home, it was about 11:30 at night. It was 19 degrees. I haven't seen it that cold for a long time.
without
So
cold.
that's, yeah, which isn't cold at all. But that's one of the things that I really, really like
Mm,
is the weather. I like the fact that it's such a modern society, that it's very heavily digital. So when you want to do anything, you do it online, which doesn't mean you don't speak to people about it. But there's always an app. The government have invested a lot of money in providing apps for things. So if you need a parking permit, you apply online, you pay online. Everything's set up for digital. And I think that's really great in a way that I mean, obviously, I haven't been in the UK for 6 years, so I don't know what the UK is like now. Things advance. Um, but it was obvious from the minute I got here in 2019 that that it was set up for digital. Like
mm,
even the visa application process is designed to be done online.
mm,
Your renewal process is designed to be done online. So those are the things I like. Um, I miss pounds and pence. I miss money, like English money. But it's not like I can't change it. I know that was the question, but that's where if I could change that, I would, but I can't. So you have to put up with dirhams. But again, because everything is so digital and the way of paying is around the world is changing, you rarely use cash anyway.
mm. And a
I
lot
mean,
of countries are advancing to being cashless societies. Is
yes.
Dubai practically there?
Um, I would say from a consumer point of view, mostly yes. But I do walk into the bank from time to time and I see people depositing large amounts of money.
Mm,
Um, what one of the ways that people are paid, not salaries, but if you ask a contractor to do a job, or yeah, let's say that one instead of paying electronically, the company will have cash. They'll deposit the cash directly in the contractor's bank account rather than making an electronic payment, which to me seems completely backwards. It's usually a shortcut to
mm,
something. Right? It's not dishonest. It's just saved. So there are safeguards in place when you set up a pay at the bank. You have to wait 24 hours or whatever. So it saves that wait because
right.
usually they've left it till the last minute. There's a lot of that goes on here as well.
Mm,
Things are left to the last minute.
right. But it's also a country that is becoming kind of known for startups and things like that. It's a good place for people to
Mm-hmm.
go into the country and start a business.
Yes,
You know much about
yes.
that?
Well, I mean, I think that sits alongside their desire to have people move here.
Mm,
You know, the economy here runs on the number of people that live here or the number of people that visit it. So tourism is a huge thing. Um, But for example, you can come and live here if you're setting up a company, or you can come and live here. You can get a visa if you are working remotely. There are certain criteria to that, and I can't remember them off the top of my head. But if your company in the UK says you can work from anywhere in the world, you can apply for a visa here, and this can be the place that you work from.
Mm,
So, and they are very. Um, it's not that they're entrepreneurial; they are, but they are also encouraging people to set up businesses. I mean, you're absolutely right. They want people to set up businesses here, and they're advanced in a lot of things, and I think they want business to be one of the things that they're known for. Business and
mm,
businesses,
mm,
like if Tesla was here, that would be great. We don't have the ability to manufacture most cars here, for example.
right.
Um, but if they could have the head office here and then build them somewhere else, then that would be attractive. And in fact, as I'm saying that, there is a shopping center in a place called Dubai Silicon Oasis, which is the Silicon Valley of Dubai. And there's a shopping center there, which apparently was built to be a car factory, but I can't remember the manufacturer. It was a brand new car manufacturer. It wasn't one of the established European or American, Japanese brands. And then that didn't happen for some reason, so they turned it into another shopping mall, which is another feature of Dubai. There are shopping malls on almost every corner. By the by, but yeah, they're encouraging businesses. They want businesses to be here, and they want people to be successful to be here because that helps the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do they marry up that drive for business with sustainability? Because that's like a in word at the moment.
Yes, that's a very good question. So, as a mindset, because everything's so digital, um, there's a even if it's a small thing, it's a move to sustainable because things don't have paper to
Mm,
them. Um, I'm not sure enough. I don't want to say something that's incorrect.
mm, mm,
Um, what I can say is the effort to recycle. Like in the UK, when I had a house, I had, I think, three garbage bins. I have one garbage bin here. Everything goes in it. And I don't know if they take my garbage away and then sort it, or whether they just put it all in the same landfill. I don't know what happens to it. And until you asked the question, I actually wasn't interested in what happens to it. I probably should be more interested. Um, I think sustainable can be a bit of a buzzword. But I'm
true.
not entirely
Yeah.
sure what the efforts are.
Mm, yeah. Given your experience as a property manager and interest in real estate, that must make Dubai a really fascinating place to be. Because how I relate to Dubai, knowing nothing, having never been, and everything you're saying is very insightful for me. But on the simple face of it, Dubai is like luxury and vast real estate. So I'm
Mhm.
just curious in hearing your perspective because you actually know about property and real estate. And
Yes,
yeah, so I'm just
apparently.
curious. So I'm just curious
Apparently.
about your
Well,
observation.
let me deal with the luxury bit first. Um, there are a lot of places here that are really luxurious. There are a lot of places here that think they're luxurious that aren't luxurious. But I think that's not a Dubai thing. That's everywhere in the world. Um, and it's not always obvious to people. It certainly wasn't obvious to me until I saw it. But we don't have slums, right? But there are areas, for example, where um, they call them labor camps, which I think is a terrible word for them and all sorts of connotations to Nazi Germany in the 40s. But where laborers live, there's also staff accommodation. And staff accommodation actually generally looks quite nice. So if you work for one of the big hotel chains, they have huge tower buildings where they house all their staff. I've never been inside, so I don't know what conditions are like inside. But I gather it's okay. I'm not sure about the Labour camps, but if you drive past them, they don't look like nice places to live for us as white people. Um, that's just how it is. But from a property perspective, um, it has a very American feel to it. My experience of the aesthetics of the building. So they have big lobbies. There's lots of glass and lots of shiny, whether it's the floors or the handrails or that kind of thing. But also, when it rains, it doesn't rain often, and when it rains, it can rain a lot. We had some terrible storms in April last year, but and they were one-offs. But even when it rains normally, if you walk around a shopping centre, there is always, almost always, a leak. You can walk around the store and there'll be buckets collecting water because they're not built for rain. I imagine they're not. In the UK, when they build or they do a repair on a building, they water test it. So they'll literally, if there's scaffolding on the building, they'll go up the scaffolding with a hose and pour water over the repair to make sure that it's waterproof. I'm not sure that they do that here.
Mm.
But a lot of the buildings, as far as I can tell, were put up very quickly. There's still buildings going up. They must be running out of space, but of course we're in the middle of the desert, so I'm not sure that they are. And then it's about the infrastructure, and the infrastructure here is very good. You always know when a building's coming because the road comes first. So they build the road, then because they can't get the trucks and the equipment in to do the building if they haven't got a road. But yeah, the architecture is, as I say, similar to the United States, and I'm not sure how well the buildings are put together. There's lots of anecdotal, I'm not going to say evidence, but people always have an opinion about the quality of the build. I'm not qualified to talk about the quality of the build, so I won't, other than my comments about the waterproofing. But there's a lot of property being put up very quickly, and all the malls are lovely. They're nice to walk around. They're climatically controlled. As I said, you've even got air-conditioned train stations. Can you imagine that in London, going down Piccadilly Circus and feeling the air conditioning? I mean, it's just ridiculous. But here, it's kind of necessary because the tube stations, they're not underground, they're all overground, and they're all in the sun, and they're very distinctive. They're kind of like a bronzy, browny kind of colour. They're all the same, and I imagine they attract the sun. So they have to be air conditioned.
Yeah.
In a way that Piccadilly Circus doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your description of Dubai, the closest I can relate to it is Singapore, because Singapore is very air conditioned, and you can go from context to context through the air conditioning, and you see the luxury as a tourist. And it's only really if you know Singaporeans or local people living there that you get to discover a little bit more about behind the scenes kind of life.
Yes.
And life doesn't look as glossy as it looks superficially. But it's, but equally, that's not to criticize Singapore. I adore Singapore. But have you been to Singapore? Would you say I'm drawing a kind of...
yes, yes to all those questions. The comparison you're drawing is actually it's a very good one, and I have been to Singapore, and as I think about it inside of what you said, yes, there are a lot of similarities, and I think the biggest similarity. So I'm not sure if this is official, but Dubai is there's a ruler of the UAE. What the ruler says goes, right? If the ruler says jump, you jump. And it's known as, and this is the bit I don't know if it's officially known as, but certainly when I've talked to people, it's known as a beneficial dictatorship. I can't even remember the word, but it's something like that, or dictative benefit, something like that. It's a dictatorship.
A dictator, but it's a benefactor.
Yes. So I can't remember now which way it will come to me right at the end. But I believe Singapore is run in the same way. like that. So
Mm.
although Dubai is part of the larger UAE, it has this other thing to it. And of course, uh, it is similar. I also think Singapore's a bit of a model village, the way it's been put together. I think Hong Kong as well, to an extent, is also a bit of a model village, just because you've got so much crammed into such a small space.
Mm.
And when I say model village, that's not a criticism.
No, I
It's just
didn't
a way.
hear it as that. Yeah.
It's just a way to describe it. You've got everything in within a very small space of or short distance of each other. But yeah, I think there are a lot of similarities between Singapore and Dubai. Um, and to touch on the thing you said about when you know people who live there, I think it's the same for anywhere. And this is a big thing. You know, people come here on holiday. It's different as a holiday destination to how it is as somewhere to live. Like in the same way that New York would be.
Mm.
You know, people go to New York on holiday. It's very different going to New York on holiday than it is going to than it is living there. For a start, you don't live in a 5-star hotel or a 4-star hotel when you move to a country. So people have an idea that Dubai is expensive, and my experience is it's not. I mean, if you want to go to a 5-star hotel and have a 5-course meal with wine, and alcohol is readily available here, but it comes at a cost. But that bumps up like it does anywhere, I guess. I don't drink, so I don't have that problem. But that bumps up the price. So when people say, "Oh, a meal for two cost X," and X is double what it would cost in London, well, that's probably why. But
Mm.
actually, you don't have to. If you live here, you don't go out for those kinds of meals, except for special occasions, which is when people tend to go out for those kind of meals, unless you're a billionaire, in which case you probably eat like that all the time. But you get the point I'm trying to make,
Yeah.
that when you live somewhere, you there are places that people go to regularly that don't involve a 5-star hotel or 7-star restaurant or Michelin stars or whatever. So you get a different vibe to it, and that goes back to what I said at the beginning about it's different as a holiday destination to what it is when you live somewhere. Um,
Absolutely.
and actually, my mum came to visit me and my brother a couple of weeks ago, and you kind of we both, in fact, we all get this kind of fatigue from going out to dinner every night because we're just not used to it.
Yeah.
So because she's on holiday, we're on holiday, and then it gets to the point, oh, where are we going to go tonight? What are we going to eat? Where are we going to eat? It's like, and then you have one night at home. It's like, oh, just cook what, I'll cook a spag bowl because it's nice and easy.
Yeah, no, I think I think you're raising something really like important about the fact that you see a country one way as a visitor and you see it entirely differently as someone who's living there. And I think also your parallel about being a guest of the
Mm,
host country is
yeah.
a really important point. What are some of the things that you think are worth knowing as someone who lives there? In other words, if somebody were listening and they were thinking, oh, I'd like to go and live in Dubai based on whatever
Hmm.
expectation or perspective they have running for them,
Yeah.
what would you say are a couple of things that you'd be like, they should know, or you wish you'd known in advance?
I don't think there's anything I wish I'd known, um, because that's part of the journey
Very
is
true.
the discovering it. And when you first come to a country, you well, certainly for me when I first, so I had my brother in my ear. Oh, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to get this, you've got to go there, you got right, which was great. It wasn't a problem, but there was still a load of stuff to discover, and then there was stuff that I discovered that he doesn't know about, and I can't give you an example, but there just is.
Mm,
Um, but so I don't know what I wish I'd known before I came here. I, I think I think I don't think it would have stopped me from moving here, but as I said, I think that's part of the journey is the
mm,
discovery.
yeah.
Um, but one of the things that strikes me is, and this is for if anybody's listening. I mean, I hope people are listening. Um,
So do I.
But if they are, it's dead easy to come here. And actually, that was one of the attractions. I turned up with a suitcase. So I booked my flight online. I must have been in Thailand at the time. I booked a flight from London Heathrow to Dubai Airport on the 29th of June 2000, sorry, 29th of January 2019. And I literally packed a suitcase and started my new life. Now I was living with my brother, so that was easy. And then I didn't have the aggravation of having to have somewhere to live first, and it came without a job, etc., etc. Of course, if you're traveling with a family, with children, you're going to want to sort out somewhere to live first. But it's if you're in London, for example, it's not far enough away that you can't come over for a couple of days to look for a place. And actually, one of the things about Dubai is it's in the middle of all sorts of places. So it's kind of equidistant to London and Bangkok.
Oh,
Right. So you've got a good connection to the Far East, and you've got a good connection to the edge of Europe, which means it doesn't take that long to go to places like Frankfurt or Zurich, or whereas if you're traveling from London to Bangkok, you've got that 12-hour flight. It's a real pain in the neck. I mean, even so, the Philippines is 9 hours from here. Singapore, I think, is 8 hours. There's a lot of places that are in easy reach of here. It's one of the great things. And I know from listening to your podcasts that you'd like to take advantage of the fact you've got places nearby.
yeah.
Well, so do I when I can. And so Bangkok's an easy one. You just literally jump on a plane, 6 hours later, you're there. Istanbul actually is another one. It's 3.5, 4 hours away.
Wow.
And when you get to Istanbul, it's a different world completely. Because of the history and the culture and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, it is easy to come here, especially if you're single. You literally just turn up with a suitcase. You can book yourself into a relatively cheap hotel for a week while you find somewhere to live. So that's a great thing. Getting a job or getting your visa is the key to really starting life. If you don't have a visa, you're always a tourist. And like every country, you can't be a tourist forever, so you have to renew your tourist visa. But once you get a job, then you can open a bank account, then you can rent a place, which is another thing. You can't rent a place until you've got your visa. So you can come over first to see where you wanted to live, but unless you're coming with a job, maybe you're being sent here by your work, or you've had a job offer, you can't actually do any of that until you've got your visa.
Yeah.
So those are some things for people if they're listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important because there are so many chicken and egg scenarios when it comes to moving countries, and that doesn't make it impossible, but they're just factors that you have to think about.
Yes.
And common to a lot of countries. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about moving country, which I don't recall that you've spoken about, is although we might move ourselves physically, there are still aspects of our lives back in our home country. So, for example, when I first came out here, my son was 18 at the time. So I had to think about, he was living with his mum. He still is living with his mum, but I had to think about that. And I didn't want him to think that I was leaving him or abandoning him. So actually, when I first came here, my plan originally was to go back to the UK every 6 to 8 weeks to see him.
Yeah.
Which for the first 5 months I did. And then it just became impossible to, and then COVID hit. And actually he came here as well a couple of times, which was great. But so we leave our lives back wherever home was, but there are still things to take care of. So, for example, you may have the same thing. I still have a UK phone number.
Yeah,
right?
I do too.
I still have a UK bank account.
Yeah.
I still have certain interests in the UK. I'm a member of certain clubs and societies in the UK. You don't just leave it behind because you move to a foreign country. So I find myself bridging my life across the UK and here. So I live here, this is home, this is where my life is, but there is a bit of life that is back in the UK. My friends are in the UK.
Yeah,
right? So when I go back to the UK, I find that if I'm there for 4 days, I'm busy for 4 days, seeing people who I haven't been able to see since I was last in the UK or the time before. And then that's probably one of the reasons I like to come back is because it's exhausting. It's not because I don't want to see them.
yeah,
Um, but there's never a good time to move or a right time. You never. I don't think you're ever going to have everything resolved.
no,
I think you mentioned it in one of your other podcasts. Um, it's just like so packing a case and jumping on an aeroplane. When you do it, it feels like you're going on holiday, except when you land, you're not. You know, there's something different there. And I guess some people might come here and be on holiday for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but most people have an economic condition, which is they need to put food on the table.
yeah,
And unless you're a billionaire, how are you going to do that?
yeah, absolutely.
So we're all prey to that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I remember when my husband and I arrived in Boston, we arrived on a Saturday night. Sunday morning, we were, because we knew we had a job uh, that was starting within days, not weeks, and because
Right.
um, we were in temporary accommodation that was costly, we knew we had to resolve finding a home. So literally, our very first day was, I think we must walk miles and miles just
Yeah.
exploring areas because we'd set our
Yeah.
hearts on one particular area, but we'd been guided by some people to consider other areas. So we literally walked and walked around all these different
Wow.
areas. And it was just extraordinary to think that, we literally arrived, woke up, and went, right, which areas are we exploring? We're off. So there is a very different mentality when you
Mm,
arrive in a country to move than there is,
mm,
you know, your arrival from Bangkok would have been very different from your arrival when you went to see your brother for the few
correct.
days before the
Correct.
South Asia trip. So it's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. That's right. And actually, for both of us, we've got the same thing, although we don't know when. I'm pretty clear at some point I'm going to move back to the UK, if nothing else, because of the situation with the healthcare. We have a top-notch free healthcare system in the UK. Everywhere else in the world, you have to pay for it, and as you get older, the cost can become unmanageable. So
Mm,
if I become a billionaire between now and then, well, then I won't. But I'm working on the basis that in the next 10 years, I'll probably have to go back to the UK and, for my however long I've got left for my final years, I already have an idea where I'd want to live when I move back to the UK, which is where I grew up. Like, duh, that's what I know. You have the same thing. You know the UK, you probably know where you want to live. But actually, there's the rest of the UK that you haven't considered that actually, maybe I'll move to Manchester when I go back.
mm.
Why not? And it rains every day, but that's not the point.
I still have it in my heart that we keep moving for however, and it's interesting you talk about health because my husband is obsessed with us staying healthy for that
Mhm.
reason, you know,
Mm.
so that but you can never predict with health,
No, of course
but
not.
in theory, so that we're not reliant um uh on the British healthcare system. But I think you're touching on something really interesting because healthcare, if you're a Brit, is something that we've taken for granted, really. And when you move overseas and you realize the complexity to the healthcare of the country
Hmm.
you've moved to,
Yes. Yes.
in the UK, if something happens to you and somebody wants to call an ambulance, they don't stand and analyze the cost or,
Or
none
ask
of
or
that.
ask for your insurance. Just
No,
call the
none,
ambulance.
exactly. None of that
Yeah,
comes
yeah.
into question. They just call an ambulance.
That's
And,
right.
in America, you don't think that way.
No.
And somebody who is calling the ambulance is kind of asking themselves, oh, who's footing this? Who's going to
Yeah.
pay for this?
Yeah.
So it's already a consideration straight away.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
so I think it's something that in Britain it is a deep privilege. And I think many of us, therefore, do have the UK as a natural place to return to. But
Yes.
yes, I do love the UK, and but
Hmm.
I want to keep moving
Yes, I agree with
for as
you. Me
much as
too.
possible, as long as possible.
So just while we're talking about medical insurance, because it's appropriate to let the listeners know. So when you're employed here, your employer has to pay for your medical insurance. They have to buy a medical insurance policy. Now, they don't have to purchase an all singing, all dancing, grade A, top notch policy. There's a minimum they have to go to. I mean, I don't know what it has to cover, but if you have a heart attack, you need to be able to be rushed to hospital and be treated. Um, but if you're not working, you have to buy your own policy. Or if you're here on a golden visa, which is a 10-year visa, and you're not employed, you have to purchase your own. Um, and so what I was talking about was like when I get to the point where I want to retire or I'm able to retire, or maybe I become too old that I'm unemployable, or nobody wants to employ me after the age of 65 or whatever, that's when it becomes too expensive to keep purchasing the medical insurance,
Yeah, that's a very interesting
just to
point
give
to
some
make.
context.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. And if you were to move countries imminently, do you know where you would
Mm.
go?
Thailand.
Thailand.
I'd love to live and work in Bangkok. I just think it's one of the greatest cities I've ever been to, and I've only ever been there on holiday. So I've no idea what would await me if I went to live there. It'd be a different way of life. I'd see different things. But I think that's probably all we have to go on. And given what I explained about how I ended up in Dubai, which was
Mm,
a mixture of my brother and the relationship I was in, there's nobody there. I guess I could start dating a Thai woman, but that's not on the cards at the moment. So it's just a desire in my head. And actually, like you, I want to keep moving. I don't want to return to the UK. If I can
mm,
possibly avoid it, I don't want to.
mm.
Nothing against the UK. I mean, I could verbalize it that way. There are all sorts of reasons, but actually, it is a great country and it's got a very rich history and lots of culture and blah 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 blah. Um, but having left, you look at it through different eyes that you don't look at it through while you're
Yeah,
living there. In the same way that I look at Dubai or I look at
exactly.
Bangkok, right?
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, that's where I'd move to, and I would literally I would sell everything I have. So I have furniture in my house, which I would probably have to give away because that seems to be how society is here. Is if you want to sell something secondhand, people are always trying to. I'm going to use the word steal it from you. I don't mean they're actually going to steal it, but if somebody can buy something that's worth 1,000 dirhams, which is approximately £200, if they can buy that for 100 dirhams, then they will,
mm,
and they've got no problem with it at all. Not, and nor should they, right? So it's easy to get rid of furniture. I bought secondhand furniture, so that's not a problem. So the only commitment I have is I bought a car earlier this year. I have financed it through the bank, so I'd have to sell that, clear the loan, and then I'd pack a suitcase. Or I've now got 5 suitcases here because I keep bringing stuff over.
I relate to that.
But yeah, but I'd pack one or two, I think, maybe two or three, and then I
Mm,
would just get on an airplane and land in Bangkok. Um, and because of my brother's not there, I know I could find a cheap hotel
yeah,
because that's how Thailand is. You can
yeah,
find somewhere for £10 a night, and it's not a problem if you stay there for a month.
yeah.
And until I get myself settled. But that's not on the cards at the moment.
No.
Um, I was recently, I wouldn't say offered a job, but um, offered an opportunity potentially to go to Papua New Guinea,
Mm,
which wasn't even on my horizon. Like, and it didn't happen in the end. Actually, what didn't happen was I didn't get the opportunity to look at it properly because the position that potentially was available then didn't become available. So I didn't really have to look at it properly, but I did start to. And the first thing I came up with was it's a very, very, very long way from the UK.
mm, yeah,
Very long way from the
very
UK.
far.
yeah. And that automatically, it's not a no, but it's like it's a barrier, you know,
Yeah,
because I've already said one of the things about being here is it's 7 hours from London,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Unfortunately, my father passed away 18 months ago, and I got a call from my mum at quarter to midnight our time that he probably wasn't going to make it through the night. Um, Within 3 hours, my brother and I were sitting on an aeroplane, and within 10 hours, we were back in her flat. I couldn't do that if I was somewhere like Papua. I probably
yeah,
couldn't do that if I was in Thailand.
yeah,
It's just not. It's just not possible. So that's a factor. But yeah, I don't. Other than Thailand, I don't have any desires to move anywhere in particular.
yeah.
But I'm
And
happy to go where life takes me.
yeah. And I think you've raised two interesting points there. One is the pull that we have to our home countries,
Hmm.
and how quickly we can get home if need be. And the
Hmm.
other is the fact that you don't know what would create an opportunity that might have you
Yeah,
thinking about a particular country, just like the Papua New Guinea one arose.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting that you started this conversation saying you went to Dubai because it was a land of opportunity, and a situation could arise that creates another country as a land of
Correct.
opportunity, and you
Yes,
might evaluate it at that time and think
yes,
it's right to go there. But for now, it
exactly.
is lovely that Dubai is home and that you're
Yes.
happy in Dubai. And is there anything about Dubai that you think is misunderstood? Because I always find it interesting that sometimes there are almost myths about countries that actually
Yes.
don't bear
Yes.
resonance to the truth.
No, that's great. Um, there's a uh, there seems to be a sense that the human rights record of the UAE is not very good, right? That, for example, um, people from the LGBTQ community are not welcome here, and for religious reasons. And I'm I'm not entirely sure that's correct. So I, excuse me, um, I know there are people in that community that live here, and they live here without fear or recrimination. Um, but I wonder if, let's say, one of them did something criminal and were arrested or was suspected of doing something criminal. I do wonder if they'd be treated differently. But I don't think it's how people in the outside world think it, or sorry, outside of the UAE think it actually is.
Mm,
So there was a football competition played in Abu Dhabi in 2022, and on one of the podcasts I listened to, put on by Chelsea fans, which is my team, one of the guys said, "Well, should we even be playing in a tournament which is being held in a country where homosexuality is criminalized?" And I'm not, I'm not entirely sure it is criminalized. I think you can be arrested for it, but as far as I can tell, people are not, unless they're arrested for something else, and then it can become a problem. But I'm not sure that it is, and so it's not only a misconception outside the country; it's a misconception inside the country because I'm in the country, and even I don't know. But then I'm not part of that community, so it doesn't affect me. But again, we go back to the thing about it's very inclusive, and there are different people from different communities, different backgrounds, and different preferences, and different ways of expressing themselves, and
mm,
they're all here.
mm,
And Dubai especially has become a lot more relaxed in the last, I'd say, since COVID. It's become a lot more relaxed in all sorts of things. So I remember when I came here with my wife, I was told you can't you can't hold hands as you're walking around the mall. You can't show public you can't have public shows of affection. Now, if you peck somebody on the, like if you landed at the airport and I came to collect you, hey Claire, lovely to see you, moi, moi, that's not a problem. Even if you were here with your husband and you pecked him on the chin. I don't think that's a problem.
Mm,
But as long as you're respectful, I think that's the thing, and the bar for respectfulness has been lowered, so you can do more than you might have done previously. But I just don't know the point at which these things actually become a problem
yeah,
because I've never seen it be a problem.
exactly. Yeah, interesting.
You know, the
Yeah.
Emiratis have put up with a lot of stuff. So the other important thing to say is 85% of uh, Dubai is expats. I don't know what the figure is for the whole of the UAE. Abu Dhabi is a lot more traditional. It's been around in its current state for much longer. So in many respects, it's a lot more mature. So the local people are called Emiratis. You
Mm,
know, they've had to put up with, especially the Emiratis from Dubai. The city's changed beyond belief in the way it looks, in the way you get around it, in what its main industries are, which is tourism. They have to put up with seeing alcohol readily available in hotels and certain restaurants. So, you know, LGBTQ plus, they just turn a blind eye.
mm,
I just think it's one of those things that goes with the territory as the world changes, and maybe the laws haven't caught up with the changes in the world. But as I say, I've never seen it be a problem, so
mm,
I can't say that it is. And,
yeah,
and I also actually I don't know that it's not, but I know there are all sorts of people here
yeah,
with all sorts of backgrounds.
yeah. Interesting. It's
Mm,
yeah, it is very interesting. It is very interesting to consider the fact that regardless of law, how a society starts to move,
mm,
and and almost shape itself. Um,
yeah.
so it is good to raise that because it is good for people not to be held back by
Mm,
um oh, I understand it's this. Well, maybe actually it's not, and maybe
yeah.
it's not a barrier to you, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's good to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually that ties into some of the things I've said previously. So let's say you're an Emirati and you see two men walking down the street who are obviously in a relationship and they're holding hands, right? Um, you have to deal with yourself about your thoughts about that. I think in the past, you might report that to the police. And then if the police could react quick enough to it, they deal with it. But now, as the person that's offended, you just have to deal with yourself and suppress whatever that offense is
Mm,
and push it down. And then at the same time, you don't get groups of locals marching the streets with placards, you know, with,
mm,
I don't want to say what the placard might say because it might offend somebody, but there's no offensive messages that could
mm,
offend anybody because nobody protests because you're not allowed to protest.
exactly.
And that's a great example of it. You know, at Ramadan is known as the holy month. And until I came here, I didn't know it was a month long. I only ever experienced people at certain times of the year um, saying, uh, I used to help a company do educational courses, and so every now and again somebody would come to me and say, I need to eat at 5 o'clock because it's Ramadan. Now, being as socially unaware as I am, I didn't know Ramadan was a whole month long. I thought it was like a day at a time or a couple of days. But anyway, it's not. And so when I first came here, um, the restaurants were either closed or if they were open, there were screens on the windows. So people who were fasting couldn't see in and couldn't see people buying food or eating food. You weren't allowed to walk around eating food or drinking or smoking. And that now seems to have completely disappeared.
Mm,
People just do not, it's not they don't respect Ramadan. I don't mean that. But if you're here on holiday and you're in the shopping mall and you want to go to Starbucks and have a coffee and then wander around and do your shopping, even though it's Ramadan, that doesn't stop people and it's not a problem. And nobody seems to complain about it. And it's become the expected norm. Whereas even 4 years ago, that would have been a complete no no.
interesting. Yeah.
It's been very, very quick as well.
Yeah, very quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like quite a few things are evolving,
all the
fairly
time.
speedily and
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point to make for someone moving countries, because often if you talk to someone who's formerly lived in a country and
Hmm.
their experience is relevant, but it's pertinent to the time they lived there, it might not be
Yeah.
pertinent to the time that the person is considering moving to a
Yes.
country.
Yes.
If
Quite. Well,
you,
exactly.
if you had left Dubai 4 years ago, you'd be saying something different than what you're saying right
Hmm.
now.
That's right.
So I think that's a really interesting
That's right.
point
Yes. I,
for a moving
I
for
actually
a
know.
global moving
I
as
actually.
well.
Yes. I actually know somebody who lives in London. He's retired now, but I know he used to live in Dubai. And I asked him the other day because I happened to be with him. When did you live there? Thinking he was going to say 2010 or 2015. He was here in 1980. There was nobody here in 1980. I mean, it was just desert. The Sheikh Zayed Road, which is the main road that goes between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, was one lane in each direction. It's now 7 or 8 in places. So his view of Dubai is completely different. It's not wrong. It's just that using his experience.
Mm,
And it was 40 years ago, 44
mm,
years ago that he left.
yeah,
The Dubai he remembers is not even here anymore.
no, no. Yeah, his photographs and now photographs would be amazing.
Mm, yeah. And he sent me a website. Um, I think it used to be, I think it was called How Dubai Used to Be. And it's literally all the tropes about how living in the desert was, camels and tents and but Dubai used to be a fishing village. That's what it used to be until Sheikh Mohammed had his vision
Mm,
and said, right, this is what we're going to do. And wow, it's a bit like Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. Well, he
mm.
built it and they came in their millions.
Yeah, says a lot for having a vision.
Correct.
Mm. It's almost like a metaphor, you know what I mean? Like a
Yeah.
living
Yeah, yeah.
demonstration of what
That's
having
right.
a vision makes possible.
That's right.
Yeah, extraordinary. Um, so yeah, well, I really want to thank you for, being a guest on the podcast and talking about Dubai, because you are my first guest from Dubai, and I've always been kind of curious about, because it is an area that's constantly in flux, that people are moving in
Mhm.
and out of all the time. So it's
Mhm.
really fascinating to have your observations and outlook. And I really appreciate what you've said here. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on. It's been great to talk to you. It's been really exciting leading up to this conversation as well. Like, what am I going to say? What's my view on this? It's been really great, and I've never done anything like this before, so it's been a great experience for me as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.